In the last video, we talked about how to set up a basic garment setup. In this video, we are going to improve that setup. Before we begin, let's go ahead and copy this setup over to the left side in a free area over here so that we can reuse it over and over again as a starting point. So with everything selected, I'm just going to click and Alt drag everything over here. And then I'm just going to disconnect it by holding down Y and slicing it out. So this is just going to be our restarting point here for each one of these nodes as we get started. Additions we will make to this simulation beyond the base garment setup will be to smooth out jagged geometry areas, use adaptive remeshing to add detail to the collar, the parts that are seen, and fix or disable any pre-sim penetrations with the collision body. Also, I tried this when I was testing and I didn't do it, but I want to definitely do it for the final video, and that is suction the shirt to the body to give more room for the outer shirt jacket to breathe during the simulation. Let's get started. The first thing I want to do is paint areas that I want to smooth out. So let's go ahead and do that. So here is my attribute paint. I'm going to focus in here and I'm going to go ahead and paint some of these areas. So with the paint node selected, new attribute, I will add a new attribute. And that attribute will be called smooth out. Make sure you switch to smooth out. Next, I'm going to go ahead and promote that point attribute to a primitive attribute. Promote, attribute promote. And it was a point, and now let's make it a primitive. The reason we have to do that is because we have a smooth node, and smooth nodes only operate on primitives. The attribute we can use here, the group to perform this on will be at smooth out attribute is greater than 0.001. And you can see that it's performing on that. Let's go ahead and increase it here. More pronounced, let's just do 200 here just to see. It's very smooth. You can't tell because the normals haven't been smooth, so I can either smooth the normal attribute, I can see if that works here. And it does. So this is what it looks like. So we'll just smooth the normal and we will smooth this attribute. So this provides us with a nice starting shirt that we can actually sim from. There are other areas that you feel like you want to smooth out. You can just paint them like this right here. So we can go back to the attribute paint. Paint that right there. We'll go back there. Paint this. Just any little areas where we feel a smooth would be beneficial to us. Let's go ahead and see what the smooth looks like. That looks pretty good. I see some really ugly situation here, so I will go ahead and paint that as well. Smooth that out in the underarm and take a look at the smooth. There we go. Looks like we have the same issue here. That's pretty good. One thing that's important when you're doing these things is to keep an eye on your collision geometry. So I'm going to control click this and just see where the body is. And it turns out I'm not at frame 1, so let's go back to frame 1 so we can see. And we can keep an eye on this. Looks like there's some areas here that could use a little extra smoothing, but I'm going to leave it as is for now. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to paint the area of importance, this collar area, the collar that's going to be seen. I want to paint that area so that I know where my adaptive remeshing puts the detail. So for that to happen, I need to see the jacket. So I will come over here and look for the top coat. I think this is it. So I will control click that. I can see the top coat here. It's in reference mode basically. So I'll come down here. I'll turn this one off. With that visible now, I will go back to my attribute paint and I will create a new attribute. This attribute I will call mesh size. This is not an attribute that is used by the remesh node. The remesh node, if you select it now, will remesh geometry in uniform mode. If you go to adaptive mode, you can turn on various control attributes. These attributes are attributes that we're going to modify so that the minimum and maximum size are going to be mapped to 0 to 1 based on this jacket that we have here. So we're going to remap them based on point wrangle. So let's go back up in here and do that. So we're going to go to our attribute. We're going to paint mesh size. We'll go back to mesh size. And I'm just going to paint red generally wherever I am seeing geometry. So the collar, lapel right here, and right down into that spot right there. So these are the areas that I will see mesh, and this is where I want to put detail. Now let's remap the 0 to 1 value that this has just been painted, and we will remap it right after we have cut the mesh at this point right here. So this is our spot right here. So click remesh, control remesh, pull it down so everything has room. We're going to add a point wrangle. Enter that in there. Plop it in. As long as the attributes min mesh size and max mesh size exist before they enter the remesh node, they will be used by the remesh node. Also, we're refitting our values here that we painted. 1 to 0 will be reversed and it will be remapped to our min to max values for target mesh size. Before you click and evaluate the remesh node, make sure you have non-zero values in these sliders, otherwise your Houdini session will freeze up. First, let's turn off the jacket. I don't need to see that anymore. Let's go down here and remesh. And you can see where we painted is making smaller triangles more detail than the larger triangles. And we're going to go ahead and tweak these values here a little bit on our slider just to make sure that we're getting good values here. So maybe, let's say 0.5, half that, and maybe 0.08008, something like that. Let's take a look at that. That might be a little too dense for the inside, so I might go a little lower for the inside, so maybe 5. Maybe min and max, that makes everything the same. Let's go a little higher, maybe 0.1. Let's go, there we go. And that'll do for now. This will be some good settings for now for our remesh. We might go back and change these, but the good part about procedural is that we can change these at any given time we want. So this looks like this is going to be pretty good for me to start. As I said earlier in a previous video, make sure you turn on a poly doctor because you want to repair any of the floating triangles that might be over here. And you can see we do have one over here. Okay, one thing we didn't do is on topology we want to delete small manifold triangles. Yes. You can adjust these numbers as you desire to get rid of these little extra triangles. I also have some vex that I might put in an appendix where it'll find an area, small area triangles, and just delete them. But sometimes that causes holes in your mesh, and I really don't like that. Yeah, this will be good for now. We'll go ahead and go with this. Okay, we've done the first two things, smooth out jagged geometry and use adaptive remeshing to add detail to the collar. So let's go ahead and see if we have any penetrations with our collision body on the initial frames. Okay, let's turn on our collision body again here just to take a look. And in order for this to be a little easier to see, I'm going to go ahead and add a color to this at CD, and I'm going to set some values here. I like 1, 1, 0.5. That's a nice yellowy color. So if I look at that, I get a nice yellow color. And now I can look at my mesh now and see if I have any penetrations whatsoever. Keep in mind we are shrinking this mesh on the outset, so it doesn't look like there are any penetrations. One way we can do that is to use a group node. So I'm going to drop a group node real quick just to see if anything shows up. So I'm going to put a group node here, and I set the values to keep in bounding areas. And instead of a bounding box, I'm going to use points or vertices only. My collision body here. And I have to set this to points. We'll call this the inside group. Inside. Okay, let's check to see if there's anything on the inside group. So we'll just click this twice, and the fact that I've clicked this twice and there's no ones in this column means there is currently no penetrations. So this is a good thing to check. So we don't have to disable or any penetrations. There will be some going forward, so don't worry, we will fix this in other videos. Let's see here. Now let's move on to the suction of the shirt to the body. Right, let's go ahead and just disable this for now. We don't really need that, but let's label it so we know when we want to come back and copy it. And this will be penetrations test. Now let's manipulate a vellum constraint to create the effect of creating a suction of the shirt to the body as if the shirt was wet and was sticking to the body. So let's go ahead and add another vellum constraint. And this one we will pick attached to geometry. We'll slide it in right between the pin and the cloth here. Now, as soon as we do this, you can see every single point in the shirt is now getting a spring attached to it to the collision body. And that is anything that's coming in this third input right here. It will find this nearest point on surface and create a spring and try and keep it there as much as possible. And it even has a tangent constraint, so it won't bend. It can actually just stay that particular distance. The trick that we're going to pull here, though, is that we want to use just the points that are not visible outside of the body. So I was going to use the mesh size map that we painted earlier, but I painted another map in between this video because I didn't feel like you needed to see that. Let's go ahead and talk about that. The attribute I painted was called suction, and it just pulls these points that I want. Anything in red I'm going to suction in, and leave anything in purple so that it can actually sim freely. So that attribute again is called suction. I don't think you have to watch me paint that. You've seen me do that enough. So in this attribute node here, in this vellum constraint now, instead of primitives, we'll pick points, and we'll create an on-the-fly group. So anything that at suction is greater than 0.5, that's the group that we're going to use. So any of these parts right here will be suctioned in. Right now there's a spring, and it's at rest scale 1. That's the frame that it starts. What we want to do is scale that down to, say, 0.2 on the second frame of the sim, and this should effectively pull the cloth, or pull this yellow shirt onto the body. So if we just sim a single frame with the solver selected, now I'm going to select the solver, but I'm going to go back to one sub-step, because it makes things easier to simulate here. And I'll go forward one frame and see what we get. Yep, it has the desired effect. This will allow more room for the top coat, or the top shirt as it's named, to simulate without having any problems, without having penetrations. And that was pretty fast there. So we'll go back to 5 sub-steps here. Let's go back to 5 sub-steps. And let's send this off to be simmed in the background. So I'm going to hit escape here. There we go. Okay. So I changed this to version 3. I set the solver back to 5 sub-steps. So I'm just going to send this off to be simmed right now. So I'm going to save my file, save as version 5, and I'm going to save this to a disk in the background. It opens a render scheduler, so we can open that up and take a quick look and see that our job is simming. Show you the results after this is done. Here we go. It's not bad. Kind of looks like a superhero outfit. Nice and tight there. That ought to work. This ought to work for now. You can see the indentation where the sword is going into the chest there. It's perfect. We're going to need a little room right there anyway for the jackets and the cloak. All right, this will do for now. Let's move on to other pieces.